Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jill HB and Friends. I'm going to be absolutely honest, and this is about our third attempt of starting this, Jess, isn't it?
I'm
And
not
I'm
going to giggle.
really, and I'm really, really pleased to be chatting. I love all my guests, to be honest, all my friends who join me, but particularly when I've known somebody for a long time and they are now a fellow coach. She wasn't a coach when I first knew her, now a fully trained, accredited ILM coach, and it's Jess Harvey, which is really bizarre because my stepdaughter, before she got married, was called Jess Harvey.
Of
So
course. Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
yes. She's now married, so different name, but it can get confusing in the house when I talk about you. Jess, welcome to joining me. You've got a great story, I think, coming from finance background. I'm not going to give too much away in
Mhm.
this introduction. I think it's kind of over to you to tell your story and how you've got to where you are and the reason you're focusing really on mentoring other women, isn't it? In the
Thank you.
area particularly. So
Definitely.
where did it all start? Where are we starting with this story?
Well, I mean, I could start. So, first of all, Jill, thank you so much for having me. I really
You're
appreciate it. I
welcome.
love nothing more than doing a podcast, but actually to do it with a good friend is a lovely thing as well, because it can be a bit more of a giggle. And I'd like to say, I think she told me I was her favorite guest ever. But um, anyway, uh, where did it all start? So, I had a very traditional child born in the 70s, growing up in the 80s and 90s.
God, that
Sort of
makes me
life.
feel old.
Sorry. Um, where, school, you went to university,
Mm.
I went on the milk rounds. I was talking to someone the other day about milk rounds. I don't know if they exist anymore, but you'd go into this big hall and all of the companies from industries, accounting, finance would be there, and you'd go and take leaflets and you then applied to be on grad programs and you kind of did that and you went on this sort of chugging, rounding, what do I do? And you just kept on going. And for me, I had my first sort of like, well, where am I going? My first year of being an accountant because I failed my exams. Because I'd got my job my second year at university, which was really unusual, which was great. But I really didn't enjoy doing the exams because I didn't really want to have to spend my time studying. I was a bit like, what's the point of that? I loved meeting clients. I loved being with people. I did a lot of compliance and regulation stuff in the audits, and I had my own client my first year. So I'd done an awful lot, but it just wasn't for me. And I also, what I really struggled with, which I think is part of the entrepreneurial side, was I hated the fact you went in as a trainee year one, trainee year two, trainee year three, qualified post qualified. You had to go through these steps, and it just made me feel claustrophobic. I was like, oh. So I failed it, and they said, well, what else do we can put you into another firm, redo the year potentially, but there's some challenges on that because of redundancies. And I said, I think I don't want to be an accountant anymore. Can you give me an extra month to find a job? And I did, and I went and worked at a trading house, and I became a compliance officer. And I'd had the chance to either work for the regulator, work for Credit Suisse, or work for this teeny tiny trading house. And for some reason, my gut told me to go for the teeny tiny trading house because I thought I'll learn far more. And I hadn't
Just
really
so
realized.
everybody knows, just to interrupt you,
Yes,
what's a compliance manager?
sorry, that's my apologies.
No, no,
Um,
I mean I'm just
Yeah,
asking
so a
for people
compliance
who don't know.
officer is somebody who is a risk advisor on the regulation. So it's somebody that if you want to do a transaction or do a trade in a bank, a compliance officer will be there to talk about if you're complying with the rules.
Yeah.
And the role has really changed over the years. So when I started in the small trading house, it was very much yes or no. I used to have to take phones off traders. It was all very much, I was viewed as a policewoman. So they gave me at Christmas a policewoman's hat with a mobile phone attached to it. And just bonkers things. And by the time I finished being a compliance officer, and actually, interestingly, I was talked at a bank last week about it, you're far more part of an advisory group that sits with the business and says, we partner with you.
Hmm.
I used to be referred to as the grumpy old lady in the room because I'd be like, have we thought about this? This might be a better way of doing it. And so it's a really interesting role, and it means you need to understand the business and the product as well as being able to explain, articulate, communicate, and be pretty resilient as well,
Hmm.
because nobody's ever going to say to you, well done for making sure it all went well. They're just going to say, why hasn't this happened? So that's kind of the role of a compliance officer, which is probably why I've did it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so I had this chance at this small trading house, and I was like, and I learned everything. I learned how to trade. So I learned how to buy and sell shares, trade FX, because the only way I could actually tell them what they could or couldn't do is if I could do it myself. And I was the only girl on the floor. It was just me and an awful lot of men and the early 2000s. So it's a very, very different time to now. It's probably the best way we'll leave it at.
But good training for what you're doing.
Very good training for what I'm doing. Very good resilience building.
Hmm.
I think in some ways it probably made me have a shell that for a long time it took for me to break it, and has had an impact now on how I coach, in that to fit in, I became something
Yeah.
because I was 22, 23 years old, and I thought I'd have this hard shell. I had to go out drinking with the boys. I had to be able to banter. I had to do all of those things when I didn't know what any other way to be, because there was no one else to look to. And so best bit about it was I met my husband. He was a trader there. And I fell madly in love, and he said, we work together. So we waited until he left.
I like the way you said we waited till he left.
He left. He went to the bank. We actually went to another trading house, but yeah. And then after that, I decided that I'd had, not after because he'd left, but I kind of was like ready to go somewhere else. So I went to an investment bank where actually I got to work with some amazing women who were
As a trader.
No, I was a compliance
Oh,
officer still.
okay.
I learned to work with some amazing women who were fun, and they knew what they stood for, and they weren't horrible with it. And it was just a joy to be there. We had an amazing time. We had a bit of a laugh, which was lovely. And so from there, I progressed to another couple of banks. And in that time, I kept on building my career, and I was very much focused on, I want to be managing director, because I always had to aim for something. I'm that person of, okay, what's the next step? How do I grow?
Hmm.
Probably to a point now that I don't think I appreciated the journey as much. And I was talking to a client before this actually, who's also in banking, and I said, you've got to stop and take a rest. And
Yeah.
it said it's really influenced me. So we
Because
fast forward.
we do that, don't we? We get to that next level, and now rather than appreciate that coming from corporate background, we want to get to the next one. We want to get to the next one. We want to get to the next one, and you don't enjoy the journey.
You don't. And you often think, when I get to the next level, I'll have all the answers. It took me ages to realize that, because more senior compliance officers hadn't memorized all the rules. They just had common sense and experience, and they'd just seen it 100 times. And when I got to that point of realization, my shoulders literally dropped that day. I was like, oh, if they haven't got some, like, I don't know what I thought they had, like some secret squirrel club or something. It was just, they were just kind of figuring it out as well. And I went through various banks, ended up in my final bank. By that point, we've now got a 10-year-old boy, married. It's got to a point that I was like, this is, great. And I went on an amazing course one of my favorite pieces of training I've ever done. It was with the London School of Economics. So like amazing people. It was all about how to learn to fail, and how to learn to fail fast, and how to get back up. Because in big banking organizations where it can be really bureaucratic, and there's processes because you have to have them, sometimes it means that change is quite difficult. But if you have people with a different mindset, you can still do that. So they had this group of MDs, and it was brilliant. All super excited. And at the end of it, they said to us, are you going to, we're going to give you a mentor. I was like, brilliant. I'm super excited. And I thought maybe I'll get a mentor from the business, because they had done that before, where they got clients to mentor people in the bank, etc. I didn't. And bearing in mind, they wanted me to have an entrepreneurial mindset and learn how to move forward. They gave me a gentleman who was very mature in risk, who was the least entrepreneurial thinking and everything else. And they said, well, you need to have someone in the same area as you. And it really got me thinking of, actually, but do I? And I started to think, well, hang on a second. If I wanted to learn about that bit for my career, wouldn't it be great if someone who was an entrepreneur mentored me?
Yeah.
And at the same time, they've been asking me to find a female MD to mentor me, because that's what I needed. But there was no one I wanted to. And I was like, but wouldn't it be amazing if it was a woman? And then the stars of the Female Mentoring Alliance started to come together in my head, which was, wouldn't it be great if you went, and if you wanted to learn presence or how you should be, you went, an actress mentored you about how you could walk into a room and own a room, and not being flamboyant, but just have that confidence. And if you wanted to if you were a creative but wanted to understand the structure that you needed on things, you spoke to an engineer. So you've got different people to bring together different ideas. And so that kind of sat like, as the way I described it was like a little light on my shoulder. And I just kept on thinking about it and it kept on sticking. And then it kind of linked with the fact that I was getting more and more unhappy at work.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't enjoying it. And it was becoming more and more difficult. And I'd always said I spend the most amount of my time at work, not with the two people I love more than anything. So therefore, what am I going to do? And the options were I either got a new role or I did something else. And I kind of got to the point that I was like, getting a new role, I was quite worn down. And I think, Jill, you remember that time I was
Yeah.
just exhausted and I didn't have the
It's
confidence.
it's like burnout.
Pure
I mean,
burnout.
that's what it's burnout, where you get to that point, you just go, I'm done. I'm
Well, exactly.
really, and that's was my tipping point, really, Jess, was Jackson was about the same age. He was 10 or 11, and it was, I can clearly remember it. One weekend, not sent out of malice or anything like that, but actually sent out of love, from my son to me, saying just, and it was as simple as this: Mum, Dad and I are going for a bike ride. You won't want to come, will you? Because you're too tired. And that was like, whoa, something has to change here. And because I was in an operational environment, being the airline industry, I was 24 hours a day. And I just thought, this is wrong. I didn't wait, to have my son later in life and then have no time with him and him be too tired. And that you go on a week's holiday, don't you? And the first 2 days you're still like this because you're wired from work. Then you start to wind down and you feel ill. The amount of people that go and then kind of get a cold or feel like flu or the body just collapses on them. And then you're just about starting to enjoy it on day 6 or 7, and lo and behold, you're coming back to work. And I thought, this isn't right. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think you get to that place, and that's the place that some people keep pushing through. Well, you'll know now as a coach, and other people go, there's got to be a different way.
Exactly. And it's just a really different and difficult point. And then it's amazing how the universe conspires. We had some family loss, and then Scott got really ill and ended up in hospital. And there's the moment when you see the person that you love with loads of stuff attached to him. I was like, this isn't life.
Mm.
And it was weird in that time.
And was Scott still in working, trading?
No, so Scott had left the city. He'd become a landscape gardener. Then in lockdown, his business had gone under. So by this point, we're just at the end of lockdown, 2021, 2022.
Right.
And he got really ill. And so it was quite weird. It was really bittersweet. So he was in hospital for 12 days and I went and visited him every day. And I actually really enjoyed driving in and going and sitting with him because we'd sit together for an hour and a half and just chat because that was,
Mm.
and we were totally uninterrupted. And I was like, this is what I really miss. Obviously, I don't want him attached to everything and the thing, but
Yeah.
very much life. And lockdown had also shown me that I wasn't traveling as much anymore. I used to travel a lot with my job. I loved being at home. I loved being with my family. So I'd put myself and forced myself into a lot of uncomfortableness. So basically, ended up having redundancy at work, and had started to train as a coach because the idea being that I wanted to make the female mentoring alliance actually come alive. So at that point, I decided we need to make it work. But for it to work, because I was a compliance officer and risk person,
Mm-hmm.
I believe in rules, I believe in qualifications, I believe in education. I was like,
Yeah.
right, I have to go and be a qualified. Well, I
Yeah.
tried to find a qualification in mentoring, but there's no such thing. It's actually about coaching.
Yeah.
So I did my ILM and I really enjoyed the coaching side as well. And I was like, oh, this is a whole exciting bit. So I left my last role, finished the qualification, and then set up the Female Mentoring Alliance properly and got it up and running. And have been going ever since. Interestingly, the actual mentoring bit is only going to start next year because I suddenly realized it's an amazing idea. Gosh, there's a lot of detail underneath it. And to get it correct and everything else. And also realized the first time ever that for the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've been like, I've had an idea and I've got a team go, we'll make that happen. I'm like, brilliant. Now I'm like, I have an idea. I must make it happen.
But I think that's the important thing as well, Jess, is people get confused between mentoring and coaching,
Mhm.
and they go together really well. But
But
you've got to be
then,
careful that people don't think one is the other. I mean, I trained as a coach. There was only ever one, would you believe? I'm so old. I'm not that old at all. Back in 2003, when I left corporate life, coaching really wasn't a thing. Nobody really knew about coaches. And I came across and I researched it. And there was just one company doing any sort of qualification. Again, like you, thought if I'm doing something, I want to be qualified, I want to be covered, I want to make sure I've got the right insurance. You know, particularly when you're dealing with people, you can have such a huge impact on their lives. And I wanted to know how to do it. And it was the one company was called the Coaching Academy. It is still running.
I know loads of people that qualified through
Yeah,
it.
that's exactly where I qualified all those years ago, and then realized actually that's when you really learn to coach. It's like learning to drive, isn't it? You learn to drive, you take your test, and then you go, oh my God, this is how you really learn to drive. And it got very interesting that when coaching started to get popular, how
Mhm.
many people would suddenly switch from, no, I'm a coach rather than a mentor, but
Mhm.
actually they're mentors. So I don't know about you, but how would you define the difference between mentoring and coaching? Because
So
I
I'm
have
going to
my
use
own view.
I'm going to use an analogy that you think you might like, or Jackson will definitely like. So I describe it about learning to drive a car.
Hmm.
And I use it actually for sponsor, coach, and mentor.
Yeah.
So if you were getting into the car and you say to me, Jess, how do I drive the car? If I was your mentor, I would say to you, this is how I would drive the car. This is how I'd move it. I'd switch on the engine, I'd move the gears, I'd do this with my feet.
Hmm.
If you're listening to this, you can't see I'm moving my hands up and down. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. And this is how I drive the car. I won't go too fast, I'll slow down, etc.
Yeah.
If I was coaching you, I'd say, well, where do you think you'd like to start? What would help you? And what do you need to do? And what tools do you need? Is this a sensible time for you to do it? And is there anything that's stopping you doing this? And if I was your sponsor, I'd say Jill is the most amazing coach, amazing driver I've ever seen in my life. You should see her do a handbrake turn. So in my mind, that's very much how I separate them out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree.
I absolutely agree. In my version, a short version is a coach doesn't tell you what to do.
Mhm.
A coach, as you say, brings it out of you. What do you want? Where are we going? And I literally had a call before you, or an introductory one, with somebody in the entertainment industry, and asked her a couple of questions that made her go, oh, that's coaching. Mentoring is telling somebody. So if I was going into corporate because I had a corporate background, and I can remember, I would go in as a coach. But if somebody said to me, Jill, how do you do disciplinaries?
Mhm.
Then, if I was a pure coach, I'd be saying something like, well, how do you think you do disciplinaries? And what would you do in a disciplinary? But actually, when you're high corporate, that's not what they employed me for at that point in the coaching process.
Mhm.
They employed me to say, this is what happens in a disciplinary. This is how, you go about it. These are the different levels before you sack somebody. And then help them go, okay, now what skills do you need? How can I help you to have the confidence to
Mhm.
ask the right questions? And that's the coaching side.
Yeah.
So I know when I trained as a coach, I was like, oh, am I giving advice here? And I would always say to people, I am both a coach, but I'm
Mhm.
also a mentor. So I do have that experience. Because I can imagine if I was in, high corporate, which I have done, and I'm saying to a CEO or somebody who's asking me a question, and I know exactly how to do it. How do you think you do it? They're probably, what the hell am I paying you for? Yeah, and that's exactly how I see it, Jess. Mentoring is you tell people, here's a task, here's what you need to do, here's a questionnaire to fill in that will answer this, that, and everything else. Coaching kind of gets to the unconscious
Mhm.
type of level. And yeah, how can I help you
Yeah.
get to where you want to go?
And there are times it's interesting, as you said, that often there's a blend. And
Hmm.
the client this morning, she's like, well, it was really interesting. She said, how do you make sure that you get everything done every day? And I was like, well, I don't, let's be brutally honest. But Sabina, there's some tips and tricks I can give you, which
Hmm.
isn't coaching. I said, but let's focus actually to start with on what is it you want to achieve?
Correct.
So there is that blending piece. And there's often I will say to people, I'm taking my coaching hat off now,
Yep,
and I'm going to
I
mentor
do.
you. And I indicate the difference in the move and the switch. And I ask them, and but I've found, and I don't know if you found the same, Jill, that often people come to me, they're like, I want to be a female MD in a bank. How should you do it? I'm like, that ain't coaching. that ain't even mentoring. A, you're not me. We have a
Yeah.
very different journey. And B, you've got to work out what you want first because it's not a recipe book. And equally, see, don't do it. It's just not worth it.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's about
Yeah.
saying to people when they say to you, how did you get to where you are? Well, this is how I did it, but it was a different time, different people I came into contact with. I have a different personality to you. I operate differently to you. And it's helping that person go, okay, this is where you want to go. Let's see what we need to do to get you there.
You know,
Whereas some people say, oh, just get on social media and do posts. But if there's something blocking that person who is very private and doesn't want to do that, then you help them find a way in which to do it that is comfortable and suits them. And that's not to say I don't help expand their comfort zone and look at self-limiting beliefs. But exactly like you, Jess, and we were taught when we trained as a coach all those years ago, I now will say, look, this isn't coaching, but my advice or my suggestion is no more important than any idea you've come up with. If I'm asking them to come up with options, the coaching question, and there's one that they're not saying, which is like standing out like a sore thumb, kind of going, nah, 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 and they haven't seen it, then I will say, okay, as an additional thought, I would see this, and that's no more important than yours, but do you want to add it, to the list? And I
yeah.
think that's really important. And people are so confused. And you get so many people who say they're coaches and they're not.
And it is true. It's a very
Fine
difficult
line.
thing. It's a really fine line. And it's also, I think I always advise when I speak to someone, they're like, yeah, I want to go with you. I'm like, have you spoken to anyone else? Have you
Correct.
actually made sure there's a good fit? And if they have, I tend to be more comfortable and also
Hmm.
getting to the point now where I feel uncomfortable with people. I'm like, do you know what? This isn't for me. This isn't the right person. I'm not going to. And that's, I think, really important. That's really important as a coach as well, because one thing I always explain to my clients is I don't know your life. I know you and we talk to each other, and it may appear we have an intimate relationship because we spend
Hmm.
6 hours together or whatever it is, but I haven't walked in your shoes every day. I don't know how you brush your teeth. I don't know how you react to certain things. Therefore, I will never be you. And therefore, anything I offer, I can only offer.
Hmm.
And it is, you have to unfortunately do the hard work.
Yes. I think that's an important point as well, that we don't have a magic wand. How many people come and expect a magic wand? I would use with my physio friends, they'll say people go for physiotherapy, but they only tend to do that half an hour they're with the physiotherapist. They think that's their physiotherapy. They get given exercises to do, but then they don't go away and do them and then wonder when they come back in a week's time why they're no better. And you're right. I mean, you're NLP trained now, the same as me. And I can tell you what to do, but if you don't want to do it in your own head and you're not going to put that work in, with the best will in the world, nothing's going to change,
It's
you
not.
know?
I remember I had the light bulb moment a few years ago, way before, it was probably the start of me changing, was I can listen to all the self-help in the world, I can listen to all the motivational stuff in the world, but unless I actually do something myself, it's not going to happen.
It just doesn't happen by osmosis. Yeah.
Tell you what, it's really annoying. And equally, if you, as you said about the magic wand, if I had a magic wand, I wouldn't be a coach. I'd have won the lottery and be sitting in the south of France. But you don't, you have to put into it, and that's really important. And it's also why I'm being really careful about setting up the mentoring circles and things, because so I can make sure it's a safe place for women and they have that feeling, because no one's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
You have to have that you have to put it in for yourself. And I think it's something that's very interesting. We talked about social media and things, that there's so much out there. Look what I did in 6 weeks. And now I
Hmm.
have six figures every month. And it's just goes at you the whole time, especially when you've got your own business. You're like, oh my goodness, if you're not careful, you could go insane.
Yeah.
Um, but it's, people,
But
you
that
have,
you and I were just talking before we got on the call about doing due diligence.
yeah,
And because there's so many out there saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm this great person, male, female, whatever, do what I'm doing." And then if you do your due diligence, if they run a company and have a look at company's house, just make sure, yes, in their head they might be successful, and that's a coaching bit, isn't it? Not to mind read, but make sure it's the same level of success that you use as a definition for success. I think that's really important. And if success for you, somebody saying, "Oh, I'm really successful," I use this always as an example about mind reading, which as a coach is why we ask, "What does success look like to you?" Or, I had somebody in Morgan Stanley come to me, "I want to earn a lot of money." In my head, that might be 200,000. Well, his bonus, he wanted his bonus to be higher. He said, and if I was coaching him on 200,000, I'd have been way off. He'd have been thinking, what is she coaching me for? When we're talking more, 750 to a million type bonus. And I think that's where you have to be really careful. So I agree. Do your due diligence. Client I've just, as I said, spoken to before we came on here, has worked with somebody else, has worked with a couple of other people, but realized, she needed somebody different. And that's when I have 5 mentors. And I think it goes to what you were saying. If you need confidence, then bring in an actress. If you need this, then talk to an engineer. If you need that, then because somebody said, why have you got all these different mentors? Because they all bring something different. And I might talk to all 5 of them to get a different point of view on something, which I find really beneficial. And you should never be afraid to say goodbye to a coach. I don't take it personally. I don't know about you. If somebody says, well, actually, and sometimes I'll say to clients, look, I think we'd be better off with this person. You and I've already done that, go to this person, or, go here first and then come back and see if it's right.
And that's, I think, it's really important. It's that you work as a coach, you work with someone, but they're not your friend and it's not your identity.
Exactly.
Because often when you move, so the challenge I have had is I've been very lonely as in my role. And I have a business BFF, and basically we meet each month, and she's brilliant. We sort of like, I use her to map things out and we talk through things. And I've also got a VA who is wonderful, but I don't see them all the time. And I was at something the other week and I was like, it's really lonely working on your own. And she was like, well, you should never be lonely. You've got me. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, just FaceTime me if you just want to go, oh my Lord. And it's true, because if you're not careful as a coach, you can attach yourself to your clients. And I never did that. And that's probably why I felt so lonely. Yeah. And I took the step back. I was like, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And if you do as a coach, then you're creating a codependency, which can be incredibly unhealthy for the client and for yourself. And equally, I had one client who was like, I want to see you like once a month, every month for the next couple of years. And I was like, that's not a coaching relationship. That is a codependency, or a dependency, not a codependency. That's not what this is about.
And I think it's making that distinction, because I do have a couple of clients that I've seen regularly for a couple of years, but that is, and I think the way they described it is that if you've ever seen the program Billions, you're like yes, you're like, they call me like they're Wendy, and these I'm talking about are CEOs, MDs, and they say you're like my window, and I said, can we just make sure I'm just like the Wendy, not in her personal life, because she's got interest. I get what you mean. And I'm their sounding board, if you like, Jess. And that's a very different relation. They come, they talk, they offload, and I'm their confidential person that they can cry. Quite a few of them do get very upset, because it's a lonely life as a CEO or MD, believe it or not. And you can't really talk to anybody, not even their partners, whether it's wives or husbands, because they bring their own stuff to that relationship, to any comments that they're making. They bring their own fears. If somebody's saying, I want to expand the business, I'm going to invest, the partner might be going, yeah, but how are we going to afford this? And is that a good idea? And sometimes they just want to go, bleh. I have one great client, I love him to bits, and he just says, you're the only person who's, brave enough to give me a bloody nose, and I need it. Because he owns the company, and everybody else is petrified if they say anything, they're going to kind of get, he's quite known as, he's going to get the sack sort of thing. And he said, I know you'll give me a bloody nose. And we laugh about it. I've got my boxing gloves on, here we go. What's up today? And I think, again, that's that clarity, isn't it, between it. So come on, tell us a bit more then about the Female Mentoring Alliance. And transform her, which I think is great. It's transform, but rather than transformer, it's transform with a capital H, her, which I think is brilliant, Jess. Come on, give me some more.
It's a bit like when I did my dissertation at university. The title was actually far better than the content, but this time
it's the other way around.
So So as I said, the Female Mentoring Alliance started before doing the mentoring side. I do one-to-one coaching with women. I tend to coach a lot of women who are in finance because that's my background and I get it and I speak their language and they can say to me about various things and they don't have to explain any of that. And often I think when you are trying to get through and noodle through things, being able to speak that same language can really help them. But I also, that being said, I've got a coach. I'm coaching, well, I start coaching a lady next year who has her own business. So I do various ones. So I do that side. And then I've got two group programs. So I've got Career Accelerator, which is my sort of entry level is the wrong word, but it's like it's an online program and you have weekly calls. And it's for 6 months and it's great. And you work through it's more of a self-coaching piece. And the calls themselves are question and answer. So I'd say that's far more mentoring because different people are giving different advice. And then I have Transform Her, which is my lovely program because at the end of it each time, by session 6, I'm hardly saying a word. The women have come together. So I bring 6 women together over 6 months. And it's based on transformation model. And what we do is over the 6 months, we look at hearts and minds, what matters to you, what's really important. Because for me, I firmly believe that about your foundations, and I talk a lot about being a tree and that you have your roots that are your values and what grounds you. And you're able to move in the wind, but that your roots and values keep you grounded so you don't topple over. And then we move on to think about, well, what is it I really want to do? What does that look like? How do I do that? And then the final bit we do is what's the environment to keep that sustainable, but also what's the shadow I'm creating, which is what is my legacy for the future? And so the idea is we do 6 90-minute calls starting in January going through till June. And then there's a 45-minute call as well each month where they can ask questions because during the 90 minutes, they will work through things themselves, they will share, they will talk. So again, it's a mixture of mentoring and coaching, but it's coaching questions to get them to think.
Yeah.
The idea is they take it away and they think about it. And then they have the Q&A and they bring some women in and interview them on those 45 minutes for them to listen to and get different perspectives. Because the great thing for me is I really want to get them to think and to read and to think outside the box. And there's 2 women that have already signed up. And we had last night, I did an extra like little December thinking stuff. And I was like, I want you to start before we start this session, think about what do I want to get out of this session? Because you're super busy, you're super, like, you both rushed in. What do you want to get from this? What actually matters? And so we do that. There's also, so because I want them to think, because I want them to read, they're going to get a lovely package from me. So a Female Mentoring Alliance notebook and pen. I have pens.
Jess loves her pens, as I know. She's very visual, I'm telling everybody.
Very
visual, and she'll always come with a set of coloured pens.
I'm a walking pencil case. I'm basically a 14-year-old girl trapped in a 46-year-old woman's body. And then and then a couple of books for them to read. And sometimes I think people expect it's going to be like career driven, how to get the corner office. It's not. There's one of the books is 100 essays written by women. So totally different ways of thinking. And then another book that I'm still debating what it's going to be. So the idea of the 6 months is that not only do you grow on a personal level, but you build this network with other women. One of the feedback I've had from I've run it 3 times now, has been, it's so nice to know I'm not alone. It's so nice to know I'm not doing something wrong, because there's this fear of, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Well, there's no such thing. It's about a decision you make at a point in time. And the sort of camaraderie has just been beautiful. So that kicks off January 14th is the first session, which is super exciting, and you can get all the details on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place at the moment because I'm updating my website. And yeah, it's just a beautiful thing. And then also next year we're going to start launching the actual mentoring side. So you will join a chapter, because I believe you have chapters of your life.
Yeah.
And with that, there'll be a group mentoring circle where you'll chat and come together, and then you can mentor someone or be mentored by someone. But to do that, we're working through that at the moment. So there'll be training that you have to do, so you understand safeguarding pieces. Everyone that joins is very safe, and it'll be like, it's like a monthly membership effectively. And from that, you can then buy courses and stuff. So the idea is that that beautiful phrase of when women support women, amazing things happen, we actually bring that to life and just have lots of different women from different backgrounds. And every time I've talked about it, everyone's like, yes, I want to do this. So it feels like it's something that's a real calling for.
Yeah, and that's where it comes from, isn't it? You talk to other women and then you find out. And that's the flow that I've learned over the years, is it tells you the direction that your business goes. And I know as a coach, I review and review and reflect. And actually that period of time is coming up for me. I love that. Is it whatever they call it, between Christmas and New Year? Those days when all the Christmas stuff is done, I've done the cooking, it's all done, and I've got a few days. And that's often when I will then sit and reflect. And that's when I'm not, as you know, I'm not big into journaling. I understand loads of people are, but I do sit down then and go, okay, let me have a look at my be do have list. What do I want to add to it? Oh my goodness, I've done all of this. And that's the only time I look at it. And
Mhm.
you suddenly realize how much you've actually done. And yeah, the mentoring, coming together with women
Mhm.
can be great in the right space, and
Mhm.
everybody can uplift people. So you're right about the books as well. There's some books that aren't the business books, but I found really useful over the years. I don't know if you've ever read Who Moved My Cheese?
And
Have
I
you
got
got
the
it on your
sequel as
bookshelf?
well. I've literally got, my husband did say, one day I was like, I'm really worried about money. He's like, well, if you look at the amount of money that's on your bookshelf behind you. Who Moved My Cheese is wonderful. And I can't remember the sequel to it. It's brilliant. It's absolutely
It's
brilliant.
such a easy book. You can read it within kind of half an hour, and yet the message in there is phenomenal. And
It's
I know,
true.
like you, where clients have come, I had one, and in the end, I finished the contract because I thought I'm not getting anything out of this, and this is ridiculous. And I don't believe in just taking the money for taking the money's sake. If I'm not moving somebody forward, then it's time to finish the contract, and we'll eat bread and lard, for a week. And it is that, oh, could you give me another self-help book? And I've said to this person, okay, I gave you a list of books. Have you read every single one of those books, and have you done every exercise in those books? Well, no, I've kind of read half of them, and well, no, I haven't done the exercises. Well, there is no point me giving you another self-help book, which goes back to, doesn't it? Like we were saying, that unless you actually do the work in those books, and I mean religiously do the work, no point reading them. You might pick up a kernel of an idea and go, oh, yes, that's nice. And after a time, I must admit, there's not many self-help type books that I read now where I get a huge amount of new information.
Mhm.
There might be one thing that I really go, oh, actually, that's a good viewpoint or whatever. But having a group of people, it does make you work through it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
And it
does.
keeps you accountable in some ways.
It does. And it's that sort of, in one of the sessions, a girl came in, she's like, I'm so sorry. She said, I just didn't want to let you all down. I was like, including me. She's like, no, not you, this lot. I was like, and that I think is really wonderful. And there's nothing, I always love putting people together for dinners, introducing friends.
Mm,
I think it's that sort of matchmaker side of me, if that makes sense. So when I see these people coming together and feeding off one another and getting enjoyment, and when you see that in groups, it's
mm.
just beautiful.
No, I agree. So, as you say, you've got the female, obviously the Transform Her group, you've got the mentoring group going on, and it's all developing, isn't it, as you go, and
Growing.
it really kicks off next year. In the
Yeah.
same way, I keep trying to ignore it, and it keeps hitting me in the face. So maybe I should start to really think about it. I deal with mainly, I don't know why. Do I need to know why? Not really. I deal with a lot of males. Most of
Mhm.
my clients are male, and I'm finding with them they absolutely think they're the only ones. And I'm looking at, is there something that I could do? And again, it's looking at marketing, putting the idea together for men because they
Mhm.
definitely need that as well. Yet they will work in a different way to women. So that's then looking at not so much we're all sitting down and I don't want to call it a retreat or anything like that. That would, I've found, for most men, make them run for the hills. But it's about doing activities, and I don't, that sounds awful, doesn't it? But maybe while we're all cooking, so we have a weekend away, and the amount of guys that go, oh God, I'd absolutely come on that.
Yeah.
We're going for a walk. Anybody want to come? That's when I find with men the magic really happens. They will open up and start to chat and realize they're not the only ones. So
Mhm.
again, maybe I ought to look because it keeps hitting me in the face.
I completely, you have to. I mean, there's some amazing programs I've seen out there, and it's so true, and it's interesting. It's where there's a real imbalance, and people talk so much about how there's not a balance between men and women, but actually, when you look at things like support, I firmly believe it's the other way around, and actually there
Yeah.
needs to be a lot more. And I look at my husband, and talking to him is basically when we walk side
Yeah.
by side, not looking at each other. And the challenge I have now, and I don't know if you have this as well, John, so if I'm trying to talk to my son or my husband, they're like, don't coach me. I'm like, I'm not, I literally ask a question. I haven't, I know, it's like, trust me, if I was coaching, you wouldn't know.
Exactly.
They were like, Finn's like, I don't need to be coached today. I'm like, darling, I just asked if you got your school bag. Just
Yes,
for this.
exactly. But I agree, and that used to be when Jackson was, younger. It would be when I was taking him kickboxing in the car. Then
Yeah.
he would tend to chat, which is why I offered when I was in Surrey, and I could do here if I wanted to, is what I call my walk and talks. So
Yeah.
I'd get a route that would be an hour. There'd be a coffee shop. So if somebody wanted longer, then fine, we do an hour and a half. And a lot of clients loved that. A, you're out in nature, which reduces stress automatically. B, just walking along and talking, people open up way more. And then by the time we get halfway, we could probably stop for a coffee if they wanted. If not, we just keep walking. And it worked a treat with teenagers as well, Jess, absolutely unbelievably. But in the car, and joking about the coaching side, I know when my son wants that, because I have a rocking chair here in my office, and always been. And when he used to come in from school, if he came in and went, "Oh, hi, mum," and then went out again, I knew didn't want to talk to me. If he came in and went, "Oh, hi, mum," and he'd sit in the chair, I call it a rocking chair. Yeah, I didn't at the time, but it's become it now. I knew then that he wanted my attention, that he needed something. And here he is in his 30s, and I'll often get a text or a message saying, "Mum, can we have a rocking chair chat?" And that's when I know that, yeah, this is a different sort of
Yeah.
conversation. So that's when I go more into coaching mode. And he knows it as well. So we have that
Yeah.
relationship that says, yes, I know I'm asking for some coaching here, but we call it his rocking chair moments or a rocking chair chat, which is great. And I don't think enough guys have that opportunity. I know they don't. We've had musicians come and stay who've said, "Oh my God, Jill, if you were running something like that, I'd certainly come," where it's
And
very, what's the word? Not organic, yeah, organic
yeah,
in some
it
ways,
is a
that it
bit.
just happens. We don't have a topic that we're going to talk about, but it's based around something, whether that's, I don't know, whittling a spoon, or me doing some willow weaving with them, or everybody's cooking dinner tonight, but a
Mhm.
very relaxed environment. So,
Yeah, it doesn't. We've started to work out the best way to talk to Finn. So it's when he's in the bath. So we have a bath in our bedroom because I decided I wanted to be able to sit in the bath and watch Murder, She Wrote. And I'm a very simple creature. Anyway, he'll have a bath, and Scott and I will stand and we'll fold the washing on the bed, and we just have a family chat.
yeah,
Just discovered that we're actually getting far more from that. I mean, we all have to leave the room when he leaves the bath, obviously.
yes,
But we just have a chat and we talk, and he's opening up far more.
yeah.
It's that, how do you do it? Because I think at the moment he's at that age where it's like it can go one of two ways. And so how
Yeah.
do you do it? But you're right, it's those moments, and then you build on it over the years.
And that's what you're doing with the women, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
actually creating that time for them.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. You're creating the time, you're creating that hour and a half for them to just kind of stop, breathe, and be able to reflect on themselves. Okay, website. Give us all the details. How do they find you? When do they need to book?
So if they want to book for Transform Her, I would recommend going probably to Jess Harvey on LinkedIn, because there's a booking link on that, because I think the website's, there's a technical problem. It's fine, it'll be sorted. So the best thing is follow me on LinkedIn, Jess Harvey. It shows my female mentoring alliance, and also I do some risk and compliance advisory. But on there, there's a link to book a call, and there's all the details that are pinned there. Instagram as well, at the Female Mentoring Alliance. There's all the details there as well. And the website is there, which is thefemalementoringalliance.com.
And they can find you on all of that.
They
As
can
you
find
say,
on
not
all of that.
everybody is on LinkedIn these days, so that's why it's always useful that they can then
Yeah,
then have a chat with you. Jess, thank you
exactly.
very much.
Thank you so
For
much. It's been an absolute
no,
pleasure.
you and I could talk forever.
Literally,
And
you can
we've got
talk.
our own ideas that we're going to be doing next year,
I
which
know,
is really
that's why.
exciting. So watch this space. That's a bit kind of, oh.
I'm literally like, as I said to you, dear rabbit caught in headlights. I was like, whoo, that's quite a lot.
Well, it all came out with a group, again, women, wasn't it? We were laughing and joking, and it kind of came out of that. And then before we knew it, we were like, oh, this is a brilliant. Anyway, we'll keep
It's
that
going to
one
be,
quiet for now. Just make
okay,
sure that we
definitely keep
get it.
quiet for that, but it's
Yes.
going to be fun, I think is
It's
the
going
right
to be
word.
it's going to be really good fun, I think. I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Oh my lordy.
So thank you to everybody for either listening to this or if you're watching it on YouTube. And as I said, if you want, and I would recommend Jess. I do recommend her to people. I knew her before she trained as a coach. I've seen that journey, and it's the Female Mentoring Alliance that you can go to or Transform Her. So do follow her on Instagram or on LinkedIn. Jess, we'll catch up with you again if you'd like to do this again, say in
Love
a
it.
year's time, because the year
Anytime.
goes like whoosh, doesn't
I will
it?
come back whenever. A chance to sit and chat with you, Jill's a joy.
And if anybody'd like to subscribe, like, comment, all those things on YouTube, it helps obviously my algorithm or the algorithm on YouTube. And if you're listening on any other platform, Spotify, iTunes, etc., again, it all helps with the algorithms, which change constantly and drive me mad. And on that note, it is coming up for Christmas. If you're listening to this in the middle of the summer, apologies, but it is that time to say I hope you have a good festive season and catch you in the new
Relax.
year.
Thank you.